to our very first CPSI educational series. The very first one is the Collegiate Purple Star of Indiana, the overview. My name is Steve St. John. I am the Director for Adult Program Implementation here at CHE, and I'm going to provide our overview today. We successfully launched the Collegiate Purple Star on April 30th. The launch is available to view on our CPSI page. We'll provide the link later on in the presentation. So if you haven't had a chance to see it or you weren't able to attend, it's a great way to kick off a new initiative. So hopefully you'll have the chance to go view that. Today, I want to give an introduction and explain why CPSI is important to those unfamiliar with the new initiative. And also, I'm hopeful that I'm going to be able to go into a little bit more detail about CPSI for those who are already familiar and share some things maybe you didn't know. This is a voluntary participation award designation. So we appreciate every institution who wishes to participate. This all started with some legislation, the Senate Bill 384 back in 2023. It is now Indiana Code 21-1818, and it established a higher education Purple Star designation and some select requirements. But more so, it established an expectation. And what it did is it made Indiana one of the leading states in the nation to officially champion the military student experience. You can see here that the mission is to recognize an eligible post-secondary institution that has successfully demonstrated a supportive environment for its United States military-affiliated student population from application through the graduation process. And so that kind of leads us into the next question is, so we're all on the same page. What is military affiliated? And when we talk about that going forward, because we'll use that term a lot, we'll use military affiliated student or individuals. So an individual is someone who is actively serving in the United States Armed Forces. Now that could be regular duty, reserve duty, the Indiana National Guard, or maybe they were honorably discharged. Once they become accepted to your institution, or if they're currently a student in your institution, then we're going to call them a military affiliated student. So like I say, you'll hear me say a military affiliated student a lot as we go through this. But this kind of gives you context as to who we're talking about. Now, I like a good quote, and this one I came across early on when we were developing the Collegiate Purple Star. And it was very impactful for me, especially as we were developing that framework, because it kind of gave an insight into and helped shape the bigger purpose of what CPSI could accomplish. And I just wanted to share it with you. We're not going to be quizzed on it later. It is actually not part of the CPI guide in any way. I think it just kind of lays the framework for why we're doing what we're doing. Now, I know with most of you, I'm probably going to be preaching to the choir that you guys are familiar with a lot of the characteristics of military affiliated learners. Some interesting things, though, military affiliated students, we know that they add to the fabric of the post-secondary educational experience. But according to the George W. Bush Institute, their veteran program policy recommendation for institutions of higher learning, they put out like a position paper in July of 2021. They say that those military students remain one of the most unseen populations on college campuses today. So hopefully through the Collegiate Purple Star, we can start beginning to change that. Now, there are some benefits to having military affiliated students within your institution. And I've got kind of a list. I'm not going to go through all of them, but there are some nice, some fun facts in there. Now, we all know about the federal assistance, and there's a variety of them. But according to IDVA, in 2022, there were 14,886 students using the GI Bill while attending an educational institution in Indiana. And that paid out just over $76 million in tuition and fees. So as a frame of reference, the GI Bill data for educational institutions, it lumps together the post-secondary institutions of higher learning along with non-college degree schools. So like cosmetology school, truck driving, law enforcement academies, those are all included. According to IDVA, they estimate about 10 to 15% are the non-colleges, the non-college degrees. Well, that still leaves $65 million going to Indiana post-secondary institutions. And I know that a lot of you are on the front lines. You're dealing with military affiliated students on a daily basis. And you talk to your administrators a lot, and they want to know, they probably want to know why a lot. It's probably their first question they ask you, why? But here's some good numbers and some.
Steve, you're on mute.
You're on mute.
I'm sorry, it didn't. Well, how far did we get there before my computer mysteriously just put me on mute?
It was just a few seconds.
Oh, that's good. If anybody hadn't figured, I'm having some computer difficulties here, so I apologize. I did want to focus on the academics. If you're trying to raise your overall GPA of your institution, the average GPA for a military affiliated student is 13.5% higher than their peers. So if that's not a ringing endorsement of why you want to get students, those military students at your institution, I'm not sure what is. There are some other benefits. So if you're trying to build up, if your institution is trying to build up business, healthcare, and STEM programs in those high demand, high growth fields, 27% of military affiliated students go into the business discipline, 10% go into healthcare, and 14% go into STEM. And that information all comes from the source cited at the bottom of this slide. That document has a lot of great data and statistics. So if you're not familiar with it, please go take some time to read through it. It's got a lot more data here than I've got listed. And in a lot of cases, it goes into a little bit more detail. But at the end of the day, we kind of talk about what does all this mean? What does CPSI represent? And I think this statement, because CPSI is an award designation, but this kind of gives that big picture on what we're trying to accomplish. That objective is outlined in this statement. It does a good job of explaining why we're kind of doing what we're doing. And that's that concentrated effort, laying a foundation, providing resources, but the ultimate goal is to make sure the military affiliated student reaches their goals. Because going back to that earlier quote, if they do that and they go out into society, they're going to positively affect their community. And that's the impact that you guys are having on a daily basis. Everything that we're talking about all happens in the CPSI field guide that we have developed. So a lot of the data that I've talked about, the philosophy, the goals, the purpose, that all comes in this field guide. It's an accumulation of everyone's hard work is contained in this one document. Now, I like history, so I'll give everybody just a little history lesson. If you're not familiar, the CPSI Field Guide and the award framework was informed by the 2023 CHE Veterans Education Pathways Task Force. And that group got together starting way back in February of 2023, and they worked for about 6 months. They had 3 different subcommittees as part of that. And what they did is they provided, at the end of the day, they created a position paper and they provided 47 recommendations that should be considered when providing an award. So they did the groundwork. 77% of those recommendations now make up the standards that are within the field guide. That group also requested the 3-tier award structure that we'll talk about later on. And beyond having a military CPL work group, they influence the implementation of the Commission's resolution on credit for prior learning model policy guidance that was released earlier this year. We do have that available on our adult strategy page at the CHE website. And that group also informed several of the CPL standards that are within the field guide. So that group did a lot of great work that we were able to build upon. But as you go through the guide, I also want you to consider the information in here as a tool to assist you in educating your institution's administrators, as well as your coworkers about the military student experience. We tried to put in a lot of why to help you give you some answers to questions that you may get. This slide talks about, kind of lays out the framework of that field guide. Everything that we talked about earlier, we just talked about, is really in the beginning, in the introduction section. A lot of that data. Again, the philosophy, the purpose was all included in the introduction. Part 1 of the guide is more about how the program operates. So you'll see things like the application process, the award criteria, that information. However, the heart of the entire field guide is part 2. It's the standards. It lays out the expectations for every standard. So there's guidance with every standard. You'll see a standard description, and then there'll be guidance, and that's directions, clarification, or required actions. So my tip as you're going through this process of weighing how your institution is doing with meeting a standard, make sure you focus on the guidance, not just the description of the standard. Some of the standards have, you have to do this and that. Some have or that. Some have a combination of and or. We tried to make this as flexible as possible because we have institutions of all shapes and all sizes. And it's not just a one-stop shop. There are some standards that are just everybody has to do it. But then within other standards, there's variations just depending on how your organization's set up. So please make sure you read the guidance for all the standards, because that's what we will use as part of our grading. The other part of a standard, the other big part, is the purpose. Again, we're always trying to include the why. Now, there may be more than one answer, but this is just kind of our starting place for you. So if someone asks, well, why do I have to do this standard? Hopefully this gives you a place to start and a place to point to. Because we all realize, you're an expert 30 miles away from home. So if you go to another institution, you're the expert. But in your own backyard, most people don't want to listen to everything. And they go, well, where's that coming from? And so now you've got a document and a place to say it. See, it's written right here in this field guide. So we provided, hopefully, this is a tool. The last part is the appendices. And there is Appendix A, which is just some basic acronyms and definitions, because we have people doing interacting with military affiliated students. Some of them are new, some of them are seasoned and been around for many years, but we wanted a common place so they could go and kind of have basic conversations. And this is the starting point of that with the acronyms and definitions. Part B is the resources, and there's a lot that's going on in the resource appendix. So we've got key federal and state military and veteran agency contact information. There's professional associations that may deal with some of the standards. There's different organizations contacts, and then we have other resource materials. So if you're stuck on a standard, you're looking at ways to be successful, the resources might have different ways or information, contacts to help get you moving in the right direction. And then Appendix C is one of the standards is that you're supporting your military affiliated students, you're doing some activity. So what we did is we created a list of all military connected holidays and observances as a place to start. So hopefully you can find something in there to build off of, no matter what kind of institution you are. And the last appendix of importance is the self-assessment. So we kind of put all the standards in there, and it's for your internal use, but you can print it off and you can kind of go through and see, hey, where do I currently stand? What do I need to work on? But it is truly a tool for you to use. Consider it an internal. So here's the structure. There are 8 categories within Part 2, a total of 37 standards. And this kind of goes through the beginning of the military affiliated student's journey all the way till the end, till they graduate. That's kind of all the standards touch upon different aspects of their journey. There's some things that you do for them, there's some things that they do, but the standards are kind of think of it as a journey, and the standards are going to touch upon different key aspects of that journey. What's not on this chart, though, is we do have a Category 9, and it's bonus opportunities. So we do have 2 bonus standards. Again, every institution's a little different. And for those of you who, as you're going through your self-assessment, and you might be kind of on the border, and you're like, hey, if I'm real close to, I'm at 80-something% and I want to get up to a higher level, then maybe a bonus point will kind of get you over the edge. So I didn't put it on here because it's not a requirement. It is totally voluntary, but they are there to hopefully help you be successful. Now, I like this slide just because it looks at all those 37 standards a little differently. So you'll notice as you're going through Part 2 and you're reading the standards, there's a classification. And we've grouped the standards according to kind of, if I was running a business, what would that standard fall under? And it's just a different way of looking at what the expectation is. It probably plays a little bit more for the administrators, but 35% of the standards that we have in the field guide deal with customer service. And in this case, when we say customers, we're talking about the military affiliated student. The other big one is 32% is management. And that's just basically an institution establishing a policy or a guideline. It's something written. Operations is at 11%. That's taking the management policies and guidelines and developing the processes, the procedures, or the systems to implement those policies. So right there you have, I think it's around 77 to 79% between those 3 deal with the customer and setting a structure in place. And training, if you look at that, we consider training on its face, training maybe staff, but it also could be providing other educational opportunities to the students. So I like this one, like I said, just because it paints a different picture and helps you know what we're asking you to do. With category 1, these are core requirements. So it is important that you make sure that as you're going through this process and you're doing your self-evaluation, that you look at these 7 prerequisites and make sure that you are accomplishing each one of those. Because when we do an award review, that will be the first place that we start. And if you haven't met those first 7 requirements, those prerequisites, we will not go any farther with reviewing your application. So this is our expectation that everyone is at least doing these 7 standards. So I want to just pull this out, which is why I'm talking about it, is just let you know, hey, make sure you're doing all of these things first. I'd hate for you to do all of the struggles and then fail to do a couple in the prerequisites. So the application process, we're going to open application. The application period will begin in January of 2025. And we will announce the award level recipients in the spring of 2025. So that is our current time frame. Right now, we are in the process of developing the application. We are in the process of developing a list of potential documents that you can attach to the application to demonstrate that you're in compliance with the standard. So all of those things will be available in December, and we'll discuss them more. Our last lunch and learn is on the application process itself. So on December 11th, we'll go into more detail about that stuff. Just know that we're in the process of developing them now. The goal is to give you as many tools as possible to be successful. Once the applications are received, per Indiana code, a review committee made up of CHE and IDVA staff will review each applicant and determine the appropriate performance-based award. After we have done that, for anyone who submits an application this year, we will provide an award letter and a summary report letting you know how you did. So you can do continuous improvement and strive to meet some of the standards that maybe you weren't successful with this time. With this, I've talked about a 3-tier award structure. Well, here it is. Tier 3 is anyone achieving 70 to 79% of a performance score. Tier 2 is what we call military student ready. It's 80 to 89%. Tier 1 is the military student engaged. It means your agency, your institution has sufficient support systems and structures in place. So that means you're operating at the 90 to 99%. And then there's a special commission distinction for any institution that gets 100%. The award is valid for 3 years at the designated level. However, we want to encourage all institutions to continually improve. So if in year 1 you're in that 70% tier 3 and you get the report back from us and you realize, hey, all I got to do is a couple little things here and there. I can get this done in a couple months or within the next year. Then we encourage you to resubmit for the following year. And if you're successful, we'll award you a new three-year certificate at the higher level, because we just want everybody to do the maximum as possible. So we want to give you options to do that. This grading scale is kind of the method that we will use to demonstrate your accomplishments and meeting the criteria in part 2. And as you notice, each standard contains a value. And that's what we'll use to calculate the performance score. If there are questions as you're going through the standards, not sure about some things, this is the email. So please feel free to send any questions. There's also a way how to do it. Collegiate Purple Star question with your institution name. That just helps us so we don't make sure we don't get lost with the emails. We know who they're coming from, and we can make sure we can address them accordingly. This information is also in the field guide, but I did want to spotlight it in case you're downloaded the slides and you're like, oh, I know that number's that address is around here somewhere. This is just a quick place of finding it.
Hey, Steve, we had a question from Morgan.
Yeah.
She wanted to know if you could repeat what you were explaining for category 1 again.
Oh, category 1?
Yes.
There are 7 core standards, and those are prerequisites. So an institution has to be successful in meeting all 7 of those. So make sure as you're going through this, you start there. The other part of that was, if you're successful with all 7, then we'll review the rest of your application. If you missed one, then we'll just kind of stop there, or if you don't have all of them. We also understand sometimes it takes a little longer. It's one of the reasons we're doing the series right now. Sometimes there's some policies in place in different institutions that may take you a little longer. So we wanted to kind of give you a head start right now and working on, hey, I need this policy approved at our level. And this will give you some time. But just make sure that you're doing those 7 first. Thank you, Arlen. We have some capacity building opportunities. We're obviously doing the first one right now. The link to our web page is right here. And you can see in July 17th, the very next one we will have is becoming a GI Bill provider. So Amber from IDVA will be talking about that. So if you are not doing GI Bill right now as an institution, and you want to learn what that process is, please attend the July 17th. Or if you just want to become more familiar, but Amber will be here to answer those questions. There are several of the standards where being a GI Bill provider just kind of helps you meet the standard. And I'll be honest, just so you're aware, we don't expect everyone to meet all the standards. You know, there are some institutions like, we're just not doing that, and that's fine. That's why we have the percentages outside of the 7 core requirements in category 1. If you choose not to do something, we leave that up to your institution. You will also see that we have military credit for prior learning, or MCPL training. I talked about that email that we sent out on the 4th. And once we gather all that data, we'll start developing trainings. So the MCPL training will be separate from our lunch and learns. So just keep looking for them. And I'm kind of at the questions. If anybody has any, Arlen, do you have any other questions that come in the chat?
No, we're good. That was the only one that I saw.
I know I covered a lot of stuff. I refer everybody back to the field guide. I think that will kind of tell you everything you need to know. But if there are questions, again, you've got the email in which to reach out to us. We may send you a direct response, or if it's the question that affects everybody, we may send out a blanket email to our list. I think I saw, was there a question, Arlen, about how do you get on the mailing list?
Yes.
We have, you may have to help me with that one, Arlen, as well. But we took, I mean, we have a master list kind of compiled from different sources. And we have a primary and secondary military affiliated contact for each institution. If you're not sure if you're on the list, please email us and we can check you against our list. But if you got an email for this webinar, then you're already one of our primary contacts. If it was forwarded to you by someone in your institution, then you're probably not one of our contacts. So if that helps, or if I made it more confusing, I apologize.
No worries. I'm gonna put the CPSI email in the chat again, and they can just send their information to that email, and we'll go from there.
Perfect, thank you. Well, I wanted to thank everybody for taking time. Tried to keep it short because I know it's lunch, and if it's like me, I actually like lunch, so give you a little chance to.
Dave, it looks like there are a couple more questions in the
Oh,
chat.
okay, yeah.
The first one is they asked, how do they download the slides for the presentation?
If you go to the CPSI page, and I will, Arlen, can you drop that link in the chat as well?
Yep, I've done it twice. I'll do it one more time just so it's at the
Perfect.
bottom.
So that will take you directly to our CPSI page. And at the very bottom of that page is some resources. And we will add the slides from this presentation probably by the end of this week. And we will also add the recording of this presentation probably sometime next week. That will take us a little bit more time to get that one up. But everything will be on the CPSI page as well as the field guide. We have options on the CPSI page. You can download the full field guide, or we've broken it into parts. If you just want the standards, you can download that. Or if you want each individual appendix separate, we have those available individually as well. There are some other resources on that page. Everybody loves to read a good Indiana code, so that 21-18-18 is available there as well. And it will be our practice every time we do an educational series, we will add the slides and the recordings after each one of those after they're completed.
And I think we have one last question that I see. They asked if which of the upcoming sessions that are to happen, which would be the best to learn about career services and engagement?
The one that I'm thinking of right now, and I'm making a note here, career services, would be the November. We're still putting a panel together for that. We're going to do a roundtable. So we'll have some different individuals. So I'm hoping to get Amber from IDVA back, maybe National Guard here as well, a couple other people, where we can just kind of do a round robin of questions. But I will keep career services in mind to make sure that we have some information for you. Well, again, thank you for your time. We'll stay here for a couple more minutes if anybody still has any questions. But if not, we appreciate everyone who was able to attend. Hopefully this was informative in some way.